tonight for the authority's consideration is proposed resolution number 2023-45-UR, terminating the management and operations agreement with the First Bank Center. The authority has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
So Jeff and I are gonna, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Romine. Brenda and Carl are both taking care unexpectedly of elderly parents, and we need them to focus on family first. So Jeff and I are going to go through this presentation. Jeff, I'll kick it over to you right after the history of operations, when we look at the 2 years of what we have been talking with staff, and then you can do the next steps. So as we know from the next slide, please. Prior council direction was closure of the venue, demolition of the building, and sale of that property. This is an unusual opportunity that we have. The property that the First Bank Center's on is owned by Broomfield. There's an adjacent property that's also owned by Broomfield. The total of those two pieces of property is 22 acres. It's a sweet spot, being on 36, transit-oriented development that is there, where we've all become accustomed to having the conversation about the decline in the number of shows and the financial impetus that it continues to bring to the city and county of Broomfield. We're not going to talk a lot about the parking structure. We know particularly for Ward 2 reps that live right there in Arista, there is a parking structure that is RTD portion of it financially responsible. Broomfield also has a bond with that parking structure. Tonight, we are only talking about the First Bank Center. As we move through this, you will see three different dates. And the reason for that, from the memo being different than the presentation, conversations up to today with Peak about when their proposed exit is going to be. Originally, the conversation was that we would go through the end of the year, December 31st, with some closeout shows. And then they would have 4 months to vacate, and the contract would actually officially end in the end of April. That has not come to fruition, those additional shows. So per their request, we will be ending the contract September 30th. There's 2 additional shows that are scheduled at this point, and then full vacating by November 30th. And we'll talk a little bit more about what full vacating means in just a moment. We're going to go over this pretty quickly. This is not new information for council. So the financial background of the event center opened in 2006. So while I say it's owned by CCOB, it really is, which is why you all are convened as the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority. Broomfield has 9 urban renewal authorities throughout the city and county of Broomfield. We constructed it for $45 million, financed through the issuance of about $60 million in bonds. The reason, if it was $45 million to be constructed before any council members asked, why would you bond $60,000 when the venue costs $45 million? And that is, they wanted some cushion before the revenue was being generated, that they can continue to pay for the original amount of those bonds. Current outstanding bond balance right now is $34.2 million in principal only. By the time we get done paying this off, including the balloon payment in 2029, we will have paid a total of $135 million. Bond payments are to be repaid like anywhere else in the Urban Renewal Authority from the revenue that is generated in that urban renewal area. The urban renewal area is called the Wadsworth interchange, which essentially is Arista. Arista is now popping. The popping was expected to occur 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So when you're banking on something happening and it doesn't happen, somebody picks up the bond payments. So in 2020, it started to pay for the bond payments, not make money. We will continue to realize those bond payments through 2029 with the revenue that's being generated right now in Arista. You can see on the last bullet there, about $36 million was borrowed from 6 other URAs throughout CCOB, various amounts. We are not recommending that we repay ourselves that $36 million. Next slide, please. So again, we're not going to dig into the parking obligation. Suffices to say that the total Arista bond doesn't include the $10.5 million bond for the parking garage that we will continue to also be responsible for. The breakdown for the garage obligations are under that second bullet. History and current operations. This is it's only pertinent to say what originally was the building was designed to do never really met its full capacity from the very beginning. So there's been numerous iterations of what it could be, starting with sports. I remember it was super innovative at the time because you could have the floor go from a hockey rink to a basketball court to a concert venue within 72 hours. So it's not foreign to us now. It seems like it's just secondhand. But back then it was light years ahead of many other folks. The community will remember some, pretty hopping in shows there. 2009, we approved a management agreement with Peak Entertainment. They've been very good partners. It says a lot about not just from a COVID perspective, but from a level of professionalism. We haven't had complaints from a staff perspective or any other perspective for that matter, with regards to how they manage the operations. They, like everyone else, has been subject to what happened at COVID before and after and post. And meanwhile, you have really cool, hip, smaller venues either being redone, like the Bluebird, Gothic, and then smaller, intimate venues coming online, like Mission Ballroom. 1stBank Center can't compete with cool, fresh venues from a concert perspective. We've had numerous amendments and conversations with Peak about what it looked like, how, when to extend, when not to extend. We extended in March to September of 2024, while we continued to have conversations about the what's next. What we didn't want to have happen for the community perspective is to pull the trigger on something. We know that we've had a lot of conversation about BTS and Safeway building. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of folks that draw parallels with 1stBank Center and what's going to happen, particularly with the residents in the community up there, of how long it's going to sit vacant, and what does it look like to be repurposed? I'm not going to belabor the point that since it's the inception with underutilization, nor am I going to go through you all can, next slide, please. We know that in the last few years, it's become increasingly high risk for our PD. We've had one federal case and it involved the First Bank Center. And shoulder tapping our PD to have mandatory overtime is, again, increasingly difficult, particularly with the strain and the stress that the PD is under. And some of the new legislation makes it even more high risk. So the declining number of shows and the types of shows increase the desire to be looking at doing something vastly different. So all of those things come together for the recommendation to move on. Jeff, do you want to go over the, it's on slide 7. It should be more than 2 years, quite frankly. It's, I mean, these conversations really started 4 years ago when the mayor and I very first started talking about having a debt policy and what that meant. And the biggest glaring bond outstanding debt that we had was the First Bank Center. So the creativity and innovation that we have explored has really been significant. Jeff and I have done a yeoman's job of really trying to create something that would be beneficial for the community, beneficial for the region, beneficial for Arista. And each one of those came to the same result. Mr. Romine, fill us in a little bit more on that exploration, please.
Yeah, and thank you, Manager Hoffman. I'm Jeff Romine, the fill-in candidate for Director of Economic Vitality and economist. I could spell it also, but no. In all seriousness, as Manager Hoffman has pointed out, this is actually the look at what could possibly go here has been going on for a number of years. It precedes the last 2 years or 4 years, but with intensity, we really have taken this on and reached out. So we did have conversations with CU as an example. We've had conversations with the developer for the Arista area to see if that was a possibility. We thought about other types of activities go in it and explored those with the outside real estate community to see what would make sense. In the end, it came back to the same thing, that it's a very unique building with a very unique set of purposes, and it'd be very difficult and incredibly expensive to retrofit into something different. And one of the things I would just emphasize on something that Manager Hoffman talked briefly about, which is that the URA, Wadsworth intersection URA has now begun to pay for the bond level, but that doesn't necessarily mean it meets all of the financial obligations related to it. As noted within the quick slideshow, and as Manager Hoffman pointed out, there's some additional expenses. At the same time, there's some anticipated expenses related to the building itself that we would anticipate probably coming due in the next 3 years or 2 years in excess of $5 to $6 million. And then finally, as Manager Hoffman pointed out, there is a balloon payment at the end of this existing bond. So much like she talked about, we borrowed extra at the beginning to pay some of those early bills and those bond payments. There is a balloon payment at the end that's roughly $10 million. And so the question isn't, could the Wadsworth interchange generate enough money to pay the existing bond payment each year? It's could it cover the full expenses? And that's the conclusion that the team as a whole came to and recommended in working with Manager Hoffman. The other thing I would just add to it is, yes, Brenda and Carl have done yeoman's work on this, but there have been other people that have also been doing it, including Anna and Rachel and Manager Hoffman. She's been at this conversation almost every day in some cases where we've been having these conversations. Do you want me to go to the recommendation next steps?
I primarily want to say, as we move on to these next steps, this is the very preliminary, so it will be in the news tomorrow. We have a communication plan that is ready to roll out. Our suggestion is that we stay with the same messaging, which is refer folks back to Julie's story. And the last, and the piece I want to say too is we have budgeted for that balloon payment, so it's not a surprise to us. It is, again, it's a $10 million balloon payment. Sounds like 6.5 years is a lifetime away, but it is right around the corner, especially when we're talking about budgeting. We will be looking to refinance in 2024. Much like when you refinance your house, we're not taking cash out, and we're not changing the term, the limit. Part of the financial deal that is in place right now is the interest rates couldn't go lower than 5%. So in the past, when the interest rates were lower than 5%, the deal that was on the table precluded us from having that opportunity. So when we refinance, again, it's a clean slate of having the capabilities to be able to anticipate what the next 7 years may bring us financially and otherwise.
Real quick, when was it refinanced like that?
Nothing has happened since 2012.
2012.
Right, but in 2012, again, the thought process was who could have anticipated that the interest rates were going to be lower than 5%. So when we refinance, we want to be able to anticipate interest rates being zero to whatever it is, right? So again, the time has come to rip the Band-Aid off and to get this paid off and to zero this out. And in the interim, what that means is working with folks that do this for a living, that can help us identify in the marketplace what a purchase of that building would look like, what would go, I'm sorry, not that building, because we're demolishing that building, and all that comes with it. That is a huge endeavor. The demolition itself is not as significant as the construction and the contract in order to find folks that do that from beginning to end. And then we talk about repurposing from a sustainability perspective. Again, through Jeff, through Mr. Romine's contacts, he and I have been meeting with a firm that we are very grateful that we're going to continue to pursue through a consulting contract that does this for a living. They understand what they're doing, and they will help us design a marketing to find the right folks to purchase, develop, and build. I am confident, I'm going to go on record right now, which I don't do this often, that a year from now, we will either be through demolition or really close to being completed with demolition and having brought back a package to council about what we anticipate some options are that are going to be there. So we're feeling not cautiously optimistic, but very optimistic that we will be able to take that land and do something that will bring us into the future, that will make it viable and be a good fit for Arista, good fit for transit-oriented development, and a good fit to be right off of 36, having 250,000 cars a month pass by there. So again, it's we're in a unique position, particularly because we own that land. And there's a parking garage. And so I'm going to say it now too, because I know Mr. Weens is listening. We have a little bit of a disconnect on utilizing that parking garage, but I have asked him to keep an open mind about what that looks like from a marketing perspective. Mr. Romine, anything to add before we turn it over to council for questions?
Not at all. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Just trying to wrap my head around it. It's big. Public comments is next. Any member of the public? Maybe we do. No? Okay. Council questions. Who wants to go first? Councilmember Deborah.
Thank you, Mayor. This is all stuff we've been over before, but it's always helpful to get some reminders. How much money are we hemorrhaging every year from this, and kind of what are we doing by stopping the bleeding now, essentially?
So if the bond payments are about $4.5 million. So again, Arista beginning in 2020, which is really the council member, that's what gave us the flexibility to do something. Otherwise, we would have to go into the general fund to the tune of $4.5 million that we have had to do in the past. So up to 2020, that's why we were borrowing funds. And so I'm treading carefully here because whatever decisions were made prior to this leadership team's how to pay for it or where to borrow, they made the best decision at the time that they could. So we're just going to talk about what we're doing moving forward. So starting in 2020, the bond payment of 4.5. As Jeff had mentioned, there's additional funds. We're paying for the $10.5 million for the parking garage, which is in addition to the $135 million that we'll be finally paying off. Right now, we're paying about $800,000 for the other pieces. So when it's all, well, without getting into the weeds, having it go dark is not, we're not going to have to bear additional burdens that we're not already bearing simply because Arista is generating what we need for that big ticket item.
I could just add a quick,
Please.
Just for everybody's, and sometimes we do this, and I do this all the time in conversations. Borough owns the 1stBank Center. City and County of Broomfield owns the 12 acres to the south that's on the other side of the Arista development, to the south side of development. Borough issued the bonds for that Ms. Hoffman's talking about. And so it's the borough debt, and the borough funds are what's paying that borough debt. So it's not coming out of the city's, it's not our bond obligation as the City and County of Broomfield. I know that's a nuance, but it's an important nuance sometimes to make sure. So this is related to a very specific project that has a very specific dedicated revenue source for it that was not meeting that level. But that's how the money was brought in through those other URA areas that Ms. Hoffman talked about. Is that, I just want to make sure that everyone does understand, as you do like the road calls, there are two different organizations here. Manager Hoffman is the city and county manager. She's also the executive director of Borough. So we sometimes have two
Super
hats.
fun.
We have plenty of hats, just as you all do have 2 or 3 hats. You used to be the Department of Health and things like that. So that's, I just want to make sure that it's clear about that, because that distinction does matter related to the debt.
Thank you for that. I should have referred to you then as Director Hoffman. So I apologize for that. Yes, Executive Hoffman. So then I guess a follow-up question here. What does this do to our credit rating then, knowing this distinction, or our ability to borrow money or use leverage in the future? What sort of impact would this decision have, if any?
So if I could very briefly, it doesn't affect the city and county of Broomfield specifically, other than that additional subsidy that Director Hoffman was doing. Sorry, now I'm going to do this and then mess myself
Please
up.
don't.
Yeah. She yells at me when I've done this once before. So, but anyway, in all seriousness, the key is the city and county of Broomfield's debt isn't changing and will not be deteriorated because of anything here. looking at, and this is where Brenda's really been working hard, as well as some of the other folks that work with us on these things, is to make sure that we don't affect the borough ratings either. And so the key here is, as Manager Hoffman pointed out, was in 2020, the level of revenue being generated for borough from that particular URA area is now sufficient to cover that bond level of payment. So that's what holds it. And in preliminary conversations with the holder of those debts and the people that are providing that risk support, they actually feel this is a strong move and the smart move for us to do. The real underlying key here is it changes it from something that has a kind of a neutral to negative impact on the whole area into what we hope is going to be very strong development coming forward that will be generating revenue both for the city and county of Broomfield, as well as potentially borough, because the additional property tax and potentially sales tax would be generated from a new development to be coming there. Right now, that center does not produce property tax because it is publicly owned. Is that?
Yes, that's very helpful.
What Manager Hoffman has told me repeatedly is when somebody asks you the time, tell them the time. I'm trying to tell you the time with a little bit of the second hand too.
Yes, this is definitely helpful. And then a tiny bit of a history lesson as a reminder for all of us here. We have never broken even on this, so to speak. Is that the case?
I would say from a generalized point of view, that is true.
Okay, thank you. That's
Yeah,
all my
not
questions.
only a generalized point of view, the answer is unequivocally no.
Okay,
There you
that's
go.
very helpful. Thank you. That's what I have. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to staff for all your work on this. I recall when I was elected in 2017, I was also somebody that was also elected in 2017 was former council member Liz Lavins, who coincidentally just got sworn in last night to the North Metro Fire District board yesterday. So, but she talked a lot about this and about the need to pay attention to the 1stBank Center and to know that was going to be a big decision during even I think it was her speech to council after her last day. She talked a lot about the 1stBank Center and how we needed to keep our eye on it. So that's always been in the back of my brain. And here we are today. I think that this is a great first step. This is a needed step, and this is something that we have to do. As Manager Hoffman said, Band-Aid's got to be ripped off. We're ripping it off tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall-Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to play devil's advocate for a minute. It hasn't generated, it's never broken even, but it is now starting to, the bond payments are being covered by the revenue, correct?
Correct.
And
So not the parking bonds.
right. So a question, the development we approved earlier, when that comes online, will that be part of this URA?
Yes, and yes.
So with the development ongoing, increasing in Arista, theoretically, we're going to get more revenues in the next few years. I know that development's going to take a few years to come online, but I guess the question for the public's sake, now that it's paying for its, now that the bond payments are being covered by the revenue, why can't we just keep looking for solutions to it? Why do we have to do something now?
That's council's decision.
There were other things too, Councilmember, in the presentation, the cost of the security, the policing,
Yeah, and so and so again, we're from a staff perspective, that ship has sailed from our perspective because council's direction was to, sorry, so.
No, like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate. I support this decision tonight, and I think it's the right decision. I just want to make sure the public understands why we're doing everything that we're doing. So we've basically, you were saying is we've exhausted all avenues of being able to do anything with this now.
4 years worth.
Okay.
yeah, truly of working that problem. And with the piece and the piece in the memo that we didn't get into on the, we'd be looking at from an asset management perspective, similar to the Safeway roof being about 1.5 million. First Bank Center roof is and HVAC is about 5 to 6 million.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the deferred maintenance on that money pit, we'll call it.
I agree with the rest of my colleagues. This is definitely the right
And
decision. So
it's a hotbed of drug activity.
I got offered drugs when I went to a concert.
It is bad.
I did not take it, for the record.
Good for you. Okay, Obama. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So this is very sad for me. I mean, the First Bank Center, there's been so many great events there over the years. And I do think this was one of the few things really that made us unique in Broomfield and different than every other suburbia in the metro area. So this is going to be, it's going to be sad, if we tear this down. And I get the reasoning. The underutilization is very real. There hasn't been a good concert there in years, and it's like only a few dozen events that even take place there. Just want to clarify, though, that tonight we are just voting to terminate the contracts, right?
Correct.
So then the next steps, what are they?
Well, authorizing the, to give Peak the notice, knowing that as of November 30th, so their last show is going to, access ends on November 30th. So we go dark on November 30th. So approving the end of that termination contract, and then us entering into negotiating for the sale of the property, the demolition of the property.
Okay, so those are things that are, what the future, I guess basically what the future holds for this space is still to be discussed.
Correct.
Tonight we're making the first decision, which is we are no longer, if it's approved, terminating the contract with the current company that puts on the shows.
The
With
operator.
the operator.
Correct.
And then their next decision is going to be, are we demolishing? That's where it's going. But that has to be a discussion still, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I'm going to ask a question a little further on next steps, because you said you've talked to a consultant already. So do you anticipate giving this consultant some parameters about,
Absolutely.
guardrails about what you want to see? Is it going to be residential? Is it going to be commercial? Is it going to be, what kind of, do you anticipate they're not going to have a free for all kind of?
No, and it's like anything else that we do here in Broomfield. It's a matrix approach. So there's a team of 16 of us that between finance, economic vitality, planning, engineering, legal, of course. Yeah, we don't do anything without legal. So yes, Councilmember Lim, the sky is not the limit. Having additional, having residential, it's really what the market bears, right? So it's an 11-acre parcel that we're hoping to turn quickly.
And then there's part of it that belongs to Broomfield and part of that belongs to Borough. So is this,
If I could.
this will be a piecemeal approval, or will one entity
Such a good question.
sell something to the other entity?
We don't know yet, but it allows us additional marketing when we're talking to that consultant, because it's not all together, right? So it's not a 22-acre parcel. You have the First Bank Center and then the other 12-acre parcel. So if they wanted to do, we just think it's an added value. So whether they took it as two parcels or just one, we don't know that yet.
Okay. And I'll just comment to I mean, what we have heard from residents and emails and, anecdotally with hearing what the police have gone through at some of these events is just appalling. And I really, besides the financial reasons, I find this objectionable to continue this as these events have been going. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just kind of a follow-up question on ownership of parcels. There also a tertiary parcel in the Arista neighborhood that is used strictly for overflow parking? And who owns that parcel? And what happens with that parcel once this contract is terminated and we start moving forward with whatever happens at the event center itself?
That's a great question. And Mr. Zapita is remaining in the audience because obviously Arista is very interested in what happens there. You want to come and talk a little bit, just briefly about that, Joe? Thank you.
And just for a frame of reference, could
Sure.
you note where that parcel itself is located in Arista?
Mayor and council and staff, Joe Zapita, Senior Project Manager for the Arista Development. The parcel you're referring to is what we know as Parcel E. That's located, it's 5 acres plus or minus right across the street from the Loft Hotel. We own that parcel. Currently, we have given you a license to use that strictly for overflow parking. And the agreement currently says that if the event center stops operating, that easement goes away. So you will not have use of that once the event center goes dark.
Okay, wonderful. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you, Mayor. These are great questions that council members are presenting here tonight. I'm wondering if this will push us eventually over that 1900 rooftop mark in the area. Not really sure. Just poking at the bear here a little bit. I just have a question about, I also sort of echo the sadness that I feel about this just because of it is such an iconic place and it's something that you just can't miss as you're driving along that highway. So I'm curious as to how staff has thought about the communication piece of this and how we're really going to communicate this to the public, because this is such an iconic place to be. And it's sad that we don't have the amount of higher level talent possibly that could come there. I know that, I've given away some tickets to some people who can't really afford to do anything in town, and they've actually enjoyed the events there. So I would like to just know, what that communication piece might look like and if staff has discussed that.
We absolutely have. And from a package perspective, and the difficulty of and Miss Story's here. Thank you, Miss Story, as she makes her way down. Again, not knowing what comes next is, it's like the 7 stages of grief that folks, particularly kind of in the heyday, right? To Council Mayor Pro Tem's point of the benefit of having it not been in its heyday for about 7 years now, the majority of residents that are there don't remember the heyday. And a lot of the residents don't remember what it was like when it was, really swinging. That doesn't diminish the loss of a community amenity. That said, from a communications perspective, again, we rewrote that memo, Councilmember Hinkle, probably 6 times, so that there was a historical perspective that wasn't in any way finger pointing of what they thought was going to work and it didn't work. And where we are now financially and how we're going to get out of it and what's next. Having another community an amenity in that site is not something that we would recommend. And so from a marketing perspective, really capitalizing, to your point, on, it's on 36. That is a sweet spot. It is a juicy spot. And particularly when having that parking structure there and possibly another CCOB parcel of 12 acres. So again, the opportunities, I don't want to say are limitless, because again, that's going to be a very expensive development there. And finding the right ones, not necessarily, we're not recommending a partnership, but really, being able to navigate and negotiate, because we, Borough owns that property and we own the subsequent property. It does give us more flexibility than we would otherwise have with who we want to develop that. But we do need it to make money. Ms. Story, will you briefly tell us what the communication package looks like, please?
So the one thing I can say, right, oh, sorry, Julie Story, Director of Communications, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. We've only just begun, right, on the communication for this. I think the big piece of it that we want to make sure, I think just as Director Hoffman was mentioning, is that there is going to be some grief in the community, and we have to give space for that. So we want to make sure that we are in the forefront with our information that we are providing to the community, keeping them updated as to what is going on with the site. And we look at all of those different milestones as we're getting into the project, so that we can, again, message out, let them know what's happening and where they can find all of the information, be involved at whatever level of participation that is decided.
Right. Thank you for your information. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Cohen?
I think my questions have been addressed for the most part. The only thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned US 36 as a sweet spot. The scenario is we would sell Prudential, most likely, correct? We wouldn't develop anything, and the value of that property is probably in the multi-millions.
Mm-hmm.
So the scenario going forward is that we stop pouring money on the fire. We can get out of our financial obligations and provide a new development that could answer some demands in the community.
Well put, Councilmember Cohen.
And lastly, if anybody's been to Mission Ballroom or the refreshed Fillmore, you can see what we're up against, that the competition has outstripped 1stBank in terms of amenities, and it would take a lot to bring it up to that level. So.
Mayor, I think one of the prerequisites, though, that we should have, and this is kind of tongue in cheek, but not really tongue in cheek, Jeff, Marsick's Fine Foods in the bottom of whatever it is that's there.
I have talked to Pete several times about Broomfield and Arista development, and at the time he was working on the Westminster site.
There you go.
But that is somebody that I worked with in Denver and helped him there, and was hoping he would come up here to Broomfield. So he's one. We have looked at somebody out of Boulder also, and just trying to think through who might be that kind of first level person or company.
Great. Okay. Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, so all of my questions have really been answered except for one. Somebody asked me this question when the memo came out, was the naming rights part, and how did it become 1stBank Center? Is there any obligation remaining there? And I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem's comment that this is only, the first step is just the termination of the contract, but that's my only other question.
It's much like Mile High. Whoever pays for it, they get a box. And I think it was 500,000.
Yeah, so Peak owns Peak owns that is part of their, and so the naming right is not our obligation to refund or do something else. It's something that was part of those agreements. And we asked that very specific question 6 months ago, 9 months ago, and Carl, who knows so much about so many of these things, really was able to dig in and answer that question specifically. So we have no liabilities related to that, is our understanding.
All right. Well, any other questions from council? Will the clerk, next is the authority's consideration of proposed resolution number 2023-45-UR. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2023-45-UR by title?
15B, resolution number 2023-45-UR, terminating the management and operations agreement with the First Bank Center.
Thank you. Is there a
Mayor,
motion?
Mayor, before we get a motion, Curtis, can you put up that document on the screen? We have a modified version that we want council to consider with the change in date that that Director Hoffman and Mr. Romine referenced. If you can make that bigger, please, Curtis, to where that red language is. When we drafted this so we could get it to publication, we were operating on the April date. As Ms. Hoffman explained, that has changed to now being a November 30th, 2023. So we wanted to make that modification on the resolution. And if that
All right, well,
modification.
now we have to have another round of discussion.
No.
We should have had that before. Just kidding.
Oh, okay. It was in the presentation.
Just kidding. Oh, but look, see, Councilmember Ward. Oh, good,
Yeah, so-
okay.
So the motion, so what you would be approving is this resolution. The borough would be approving this resolution with the modification.
Okay, good. Motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that resolution.
Do I have to
number
say as amended?
2023
Okay, sorry, go ahead. Okay, good. So.
I move that resolution number 2023-45-UR be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Cohen.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Nope. Okay. So will the clerk please call the roll? No, I'm just kidding. Did you really want to discuss? I don't want to deny anybody their opportunity.
I just wanted to say one thing on the record.
I'm really kidding.
Right. So 2 points. One is no shade and no blame, regardless of how this was decided. We need to make the best decision now. And I'm very happy to hear that we will not be falling for the sunk cost fallacy tonight. And then the other thing I would like to say is that anecdotally, I've only gone to Taste at Broomfield at the First Bank Center. However, I visit my local Arista businesses at least once a week. My hairdresser, my esthetician, my spot to pick up some wine, and basically every single one of my favorite restaurants are there. And in my opinion, that is what makes the development really wonderful.
Oh, well said, Councilmember. Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Henkel.
Just now want to live where she lives. Because that sounds amazing. That is all. Thanks.
She really did sell it. Yeah. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Lim,
Yes.
Marsh Holston.
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jezierski.
Thank you. That
But
passes
we-
unanimously.
I know, weren't we calling the borough members too? They're absent, but Mitchell, it's just Mitchell and we're vacant on the other one. Yeah, so just Mitchell.
Oh, we're gonna get another fire person. Fire, okay. And I'm lost now. So, or did you finish? Okay, so there's two, or it's just a UR, right?
Yeah, there was just one resolution.
Okay,
You're
so you
done.
were just correcting the roll. Okay, so it still passed unanimously. All right, seeing there's no further business before the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority, the meeting is adjourned.